I am so excited. He is a New York Times bestseller with more than 10 million books sold worldwide to date. He's written close to 50 books. His most recent series, The Outlaw Chronicles, has garnered much success. And Ted Dekker joins me in studio today. Welcome, Ted.
Oh, it's so good to be with you.
I am so excited. You know, I was saying to somebody yesterday, I have the privilege of reading these books. Yeah. I'm going to sit down with you after and just pick your brain and find out, you know, all of these
Dangerous
secrets.
Places, yeah?
Yeah, we'll get into that. So first, I guess my first question is, who is Ted Dekker? Who are you?
Well, that's a really good question.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have an hour?
Go ahead.
Because there's really two Teds.
Yeah.
There's who I think I am most of the time, which is not me. Who my audience think I am, which is not me. And there's a true me, which is really just like you. The son, the daughter of our Father. You know, the spiritual stuff. I mean, my whole journey of life, I mean, it's so interesting you would ask that question, because my whole journey has been one of learning, asking that question, who am I? In fact, if I was born in the mission field.
Yeah.
My parents were missionaries, yeah, as you know.
Yeah.
When I was 6 years old, I mean, it was beautiful. I learned all the Christian, you know, principles that have made me who I am in many ways. When I was 6 years old, they took me into a boarding school and left me. Because that's what all the missionaries did at the time. Well, in that process, I found myself completely abandoned. Like, well, wait a second, my parents are gone. My tether to reality was suddenly severed, you know? Now, that first night, I cried. It was horrible.
I can imagine, yeah.
I mean, it was very difficult, but, you know, what I don't remember, but what my friends tell me, is that I cried that way every night for months and months, because my entire reality had been shattered. I think at that point, at age 6, moving forward, I really have since then been on a search to discover who I am. Really. It was, and I look back on it as one of the greatest gifts given me. And the gift was, okay, let's take away who you think you are. Now you get to discover who you truly are. And so often who we think we are in this life, this body, although this body is beautiful, as is yours, as is everyone's body in their own way, our careers, our status.
Kind of define us.
They define us, and we put our identity in those things. But it's not who we are. But as long as we put our identity in those things, even the roles we play, I am a mother, you know, I'm a wife. But that's not primarily who you are.
Right.
So who is Ted Dekker? Well, I am the son of my father, and I currently am in this role as a writer. This is a role, I write these books, you know, to explore who I am. So I write to discover who I am, and who my father is, and what I'm doing in this world. So I'm just like you in that way. And too often I put my identity in what the world says I am, right? As opposed to who I truly am.
That takes a lot, though. I mean, again, as you said, your readers might perceive you as a different guy.
Yeah.
And then, you know, everybody that meets you will perceive you differently. And I think you're right. We're all on this journey to kind of discover who we are and not fit into who people think we should be.
Right.
How does that become a challenge? Because I'm listening to you and I'm seeing that thread in all of your books. Because all of the characters are simply looking for who they truly are. I think of Eden and Water Walker, Alice, and I think of this idea of who she thought she was, and figuring out who she really is. How do you go through that without just getting lost?
Okay, so let's talk about how this particular, this mind that I have right now, this mind and this body, how I work. So I'm a rather obsessive person. I ask questions that a lot of my friends don't ask. You know, they take them for granted. They take things for granted. I say, well, wait a second, why is that? When Jesus says X, Y, Z, what does he really mean, and why don't I see that, for example? Or when people, why is it that in so many relationships, it's like the husband and the wife tend to be each other's greatest enemies? So what is love, really? Why is it that everyone seems to go through the same kind of struggles? So I ask those questions, and I want to know. In fact, my intellect becomes my greatest enemy often, because it's ultimately life is about letting go of those questions. But in my situation, for whatever reason, I really want to understand why. And so I write questions. I write to discover. I don't write to give messages. I write to discover myself, and to discover the world that I'm in, and to discover God.
And this journey that your characters are on.
And as it turns out, so the characters are all me on one level. But as it turns out, they are also, the same questions are the questions that everybody has, oftentimes without even realizing it. And they go, so when they read my stories, they see themselves in it. And they're on the same journey of discovery themselves. They enter the story. You know, they say that the shortest distance between the truth, and a human being is a story. Because we live in story. Everything that happened to you yesterday, I was just talking to a friend of mine, Eric, you know, everything that happened to you yesterday is really just a memory, and it's a story. You get to interpret it however you like. You say, oh, they were so mean to me yesterday when they said so and so, when they said such and such. Well, you interpret that. You could change it and say, no, that was you can interpret it differently and not take offense. Same thing about the future. We live in story. You have these ideas of what might happen later today, or what might happen next year. These are stories you're making up. They haven't happened. It's just an illusion of what's going to happen. And yet we lived, trapped by those stories, and so we're anxious, and so we struggle, and we're like, oh no, and then, you know, of course 95% of our worries never materialize. But you see how we're all really trapped in these stories of ours.
Let's talk about your story in Indonesia, because you skipped over a very important part in your story, and that is growing up among cannibals. I mean, your parents were missionaries in this, you know, community of cannibals. What was that like? I know that you went to boarding school at 6, but hearing these stories and hearing of your parents' friends that were killed, what was that like?
Well, my parents went to the Dani tribe in Indonesia, cannibals. The men wore makeup. They put makeup on me today, by the way. Am I pretty? No, I shouldn't. Okay, anyway.
You're now the Crossroads tribe.
They put makeup on you before you come out on these things. But, so all the men wore makeup where I grew up. They wore piercings, and the women not so much. It was a very different kind of culture. They were naked. You've probably all, you've seen pictures of them in National Geographic, etc. My parents went there to take the gospel to these people in the middle of the jungle. I grew up there. My first language was their language. And they actually killed and ate my parents' coworkers when I was about 6, about the same time that I went to school, to boarding school. And I didn't notice anything, because these are the people I grew up with. I didn't really.
So you just thought this was normal?
I was too young. I was innocent. I was like, oh, I mean, people were crying around. There was all kinds of heartache. But I was too young yet to feel truly threatened. I was still in that stage of life where, like, the world is mine to discover. You know, as we get older, that's when our fears begin to develop, and we start putting ourselves into these prisons that hold us captive for the rest of our lives, which is a different story. But I was too young at that point. Now, in my case, in reflecting back on that time, I can tell you this. The culture was very different, but they're just like us. They're just like us. They just want to love, and they just want to be loved. All of the people in this room, we're all the same in that regard. This one might be a president of this company. This one might be, an anchor on a television show. This one might be a writer. But you strip all that away. This one might be a native in the middle of the jungle, and not wear clothes and wear lots of makeup if they're a man with long hair. But you strip that away, and you just have this person who wants to be loved, right? And wants to know who they are and be significant. We're searching for our significance in this world.
So when did you realize you were a writer? When was the first time you realized, wow, this is what I'm meant to do?
Yeah. Probably when I was in my 30s.
Okay.
And I was a very successful businessman, but I was bored with all that. I liked, in the evenings, I was writing. I owned several businesses, but in the evenings I was writing, and I found myself escaping to these worlds where I could ask the real questions I wanted to ask and experience life in a new way. And that became, initially started out as an escape, kind of. But then it quickly grew into a journey, a way for me to actually explore life. You see, fiction is a very, very powerful, Jesus used fiction, right? He used parables, because it's a very cool way to explore the truth. Like for me, to explore truth without actually going into the situation. I can go much further in my imagination. But I can say to you, look, this cup won't break. And that's just the truth. I'm telling you, this cup won't break, and I hand you a cup. Mm-hmm. And you say, okay, this cup won't break. Well, in a story, what I do is I take that cup and I throw it on the floor, you know, through this journey. Yeah. And I jump on it and to see if it'll break. Yep. So it's actually taking things that we've heard and testing them out within the context of story. Yeah. So you take the journey with the character and you actually explore real life without actually becoming, let's say the story happens to be about a prostitute who's saved. Mm. Okay, you don't have to become a prostitute who's saved in order to discover that. Mm-hmm. You actually can discover the grace and the beauty and the love of the Father through this story. All my stories are very redemptive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Full of love. You've read some of my stories.
Yes.
Well, what do you think? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Oh, well, you know, the fact that I have 9 pages of questions.
No, we're not going to get to all those.
Shows you that I am just blown away by the storytelling. And yeah, there is this chord of redemption, forgiveness, insecurity, finding your identity, all of those things. Yeah. You have a new book coming out called 80/30. 80/30. Tell us about it, because I know many fans are very excited about this.
Well, I got to tell you, I've written many books, but they've all led up to reading the writing of this. Mm-hmm. I remember 10 years ago going to my publisher and say, one day I'm going to write a book that actually takes a female character, okay, a woman from Northern Arabia, someone who's not Jewish, and she's going to go into Palestine. I mean, her world's going to be just torn apart, okay? And she's going to go desperate into Palestine on her way to Rome, but she's going to encounter this incredible teacher whose name is Yeshua. And no one knows who Yeshua is, but he's saying things that make no sense.
And you strategically chose a woman outside of the Jewish faith that wouldn't know who this man is.
Well,
right?
it's important for me to take the journey that way. Yeah. First of all, I have many, I mean, I write women very well. And I like to get outside of myself. But we are all strangers in many ways. We're foreigners to the Jewish culture. So I want to take the journey from someone who's more like me, more like us, and we want to go in and once again hear his teachings and encounter him. And his presence is so strong. Now, you have to understand that in this story, I say 3/4 of the story has nothing to do with Jesus. It has to do with Jesus, but it's more like Ben-Hur. It's more like, you know, it's The Robe or some of these other stories where all this political intrigue and romance and all this stuff is happening.
Setting the scene of everything that's happening.
It's all there, and we're totally engaged in the story, and then into it comes this character named Yeshua, and he surprises us by, I wanted to discover him in a new way, not all these cookie-cutter images that I have. You know, we've taken Jesus in the Christian faith and reduced him to a few lines on our doctrinal statement. He forgave our sins, for which we're eternally grateful, and we're saved in the next life. But there's a big question, and that is, what were his teachings for this life? When the storms of this life come against us, when suddenly we lose our jobs, or with suddenly illness, or we have great challenge in our relationship, or we're divorced. When these things happen to us, well, let's call them the storms of life, what did Jesus teach? What was his way of being in this world, in this life? Right. Not just a way for the next life, for which we're all very grateful. Yeah. And it turns out that so many of his teachings had to do with dealing with your life now while you're on earth. And he offers this place where his yoke is easy and his burden is light, where he offers rest and beauty and power. But you have to follow him to find that. It's a narrow path, but it's the only path to freedom now in this life. I'm telling you, my life changed in the writing of this book. I've been a Christian for so long, and I've explored for so long. But it's, you know, if you take and you're looking at a prism, let's take a prism. You see one color, but you shift 2 degrees to the right, and suddenly the blue goes to red. Right. You shift your perspective just a little bit, and suddenly you see something new. Or, you know, it was always there. You're just seeing it differently. And this is what Jesus said. He said, look, you're looking at the world, but a plank of a fence is blinding you from what's really there. Don't worry about them right now. Just remove your blindness so that you can see. I saw him differently in the writing of this book, and I'm so excited to share it with the world. It comes out in, well, October, so yeah, AD 30. And it's the first of 3 novels.
Okay.
The first one, AD 30, AD 33, and then the final one. So
you're definitely gonna have to look for it.
Maybe when I finish writing these books,
yeah,
I'll hang up the gloves.
You'll have to come back, and we'll have to. I'll have like 22 pages of questions.
Well, we haven't gone to any of your questions.
I know.
Are we out
and we're out of time.
Okay, we're out of time.
And if you want to see more, we're going to have an extended interview with you that you'll be able to catch on Crossroads 360. So if you're a huge fan of Ted Dekker, if you're just interested in what he's been talking about, you'll have to go there. Thanks, Ted.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you, honey.